Hi, my name's Barry Clark. I'm going to follow up with a couple of posts that I've put on social media lately regarding project management and value add, what project managers actually bring to the table, and also talk a little bit about resourcing agility, and leveraging consultancy practices for good value for projects. So we're looking at project management and what kind of things that they bring to the table. And we've got a few indicators here about resource planning, value for money, the ability to think out of the box. The big buzzword at the minute, which is agility, business agility. But we want to look at some more things here about how do we better leverage vendor partners, consulting practices, and create that value add. So the real topic here is around productivity-based estimating, something I spoke about before, but really want to get into some detail here and show you a real case that I went through a few years ago, and how we brought some value forward by leveraging a consulting practice rather than going to the contract market. I guess the real question here is when we get down to it and we're resourcing and we're talking to resource managers that we get so fixated on body shopping and hourly rates that we kind of lose track of what the overall cost is to the project, and is there a better way of resourcing other than engaging full-time contractors to help. So let's have a look at some of the real life experiences with contractors versus consultancy practices. Independent contractors tend to require a 6-month contract or more. Independent contractors do not really have a support team behind them. They are standalone. So you're basing everything on their knowledge and experience as an independent. Often fixed to the roles. So if you're hiring a BA, that's the role they're fixed to. Contractors tend to be order takers rather than guiding or advising, unless you take them on as a consultant in their own right, of course, and then that's a different story. The lower rates of contractors, if we get stuck on rate cards, they may not have the same level of expertise as a salary consultant, and that one-to-one relationship role to resource isn't really efficient. What I mean by that is we're trusting what we see on a resume or what we get from a recruitment agency. We kind of get an hour or so to evaluate that, and once we got them on board, if they fit, then fantastic. If they don't, then it causes disruption. So it's a little difficult to juggle sometimes, and there is some risk involved. So how do consultancy practices compare? Well, they're better able to accommodate work stoppages without losing key resources. So there's flexibility and agility that can be offered. We're not necessarily fixed to a term arrangement. So therefore we can, consultant practice can do on demand, so pay as you use. And also you've got that flexibility in the background of multiple resources that can support that the specific resource that may be serving the client. And then work breakdown structures. So planning this properly to find the actual demand for resources, and then we can leverage that with our planning. So as a PM, then we've got some real key questions to ask at the beginning of the project, and this is sometimes a challenge with like pure agile delivery, if you like, is we look at the cost of something or the proposed cost of something in our business case, and then okay, we'll bring some use cases, use stories together, maybe some high level requirements, and away we go. Now resourcing, we can't necessarily afford in some projects or want to pay for just having a pool of resources sat there idle. So now we've got to keep them busy. So this is the advantage for me of having some detailed planning, doing the feasibilities and that kind of stuff before we kick things off, because we can get into the details, and details especially around work breakdown structures and resourcing needs. And we can really look at this from a perspective of if we get into the detail, we get into detailed planning questions. How many roles do we need to fulfill the requirements of the project? Now, by role, that's not necessarily how many people do we need, it's just how many functional roles do we need, like a BA, project manager, solution architect, these kind of things. How much effort is required by each of those roles and when do we need them? So, for example, at the beginning of a project, we might have high dependency on a solution architect. But after the design's been approved and signed off, that dependency may slip down to a lower percentage while we're executing, building, and testing. But if we go for the resource model where we need a solution architect at the beginning, so we're going to go to the contract market, we're going to be in for 6 months, are we really making the best use of that resource? Or are we then having to find them work to do to justify being around? Then the big question from that then is, are all the resources on your project required 100% of the time? Likely not. And in most projects, it's really rare to have a resource running 100% through the entirety of a project. So planning here is essential for the success of the project. And our costs are going to be inflated if we're going to be looking at engaging all resources 100% of the time. And this sounds like a mad conversation or a mad thing to be pointing out, but it's amazing how often you see this happening where we've got a business case, we get a chart signed off, and we're resourcing for the entirety of the project by going out to the contract market and saying we need all of these roles and they need to be fulfilled today for the life of the project. So let's just run through a resource example here, and you know, kind of it's made up, but I just want to give you an idea of what potentially could happen here. If we've got resource A here, we need this particular skill set within our project. The market rate for this role is about $100 an hour. So for a 6-month contract to engage this person, it's going to cost us $104,000 if they book in 40 hours a week. Then on the flip side, we looked at a consulting practice and they gave us a time and materials rate of $200 an hour. So if we just looked at that purely from the rate card perspective, it's $100 an hour for me to go and get a contractor, or $200 an hour for me to go and get a resource from this consulting practice. My immediate thought would be, well, I'm better off going with the contractor for $100 an hour. But then we went through planning. And when we went through planning, we built the work breakdown structure on what the actual resource requirement looked like. And it broke down to, at the beginning of the projects, we needed them at 50% for a couple of weeks, then 100% allocation for 6 weeks, and then 20% allocation for 12 weeks. So really it was a 414 hour of productive hours for them over the 6 months of that delivery, and the cost to us would have been $104,000 if we had that resource at booking time against our project or assigned to our project as a contractor. At the time and material cost at $200 an hour would have been $82,000. So it's just looking at it from that perspective of, does it make sense to have a full-time resource engaged as a contractor on this project? If I've got multiple projects and I can use them in the same functional role across projects, then fine, but this project shouldn't be picking up the bill for that then. Or would it be better for me to go out to a practice and bring this resource in on demand on a time and materials basis? In this case, it works out better for me to have done that, even though I would have been paying the higher rate. Challenge you've got here then is the rate card thing. It really does play havoc with us in that your procurement in your company may look at this and say, well, $100 an hour, it doesn't make sense to hire someone at $200 an hour, go and get the resource at $100. So we really do have to have structured justification behind why I would sooner go out to a consulting practice and pay a higher rate for this resource. And if you had this kind of breakdown, it does justify some. Now, why I really got to this subject was a few years back I was brought into a company in Canada, in Edmonton, and I was presented with a couple of projects, and one of them was a development a few web services and a web portal. Pretty decent sized project, good sized team. But the project was literally at charter stage, and when I looked at the charter and the business case, they were almost identical. So what it really said to me is that someone had taken the information out of the business case, fed it into a charter, and the business was off writing job descriptions to go to the contract market to hire the roles that were identified on the in the charter. So I had a quick look at this and said I didn't really feel comfortable with the charter findings. Would it be possible to have a week or so for me to do some findings, justify this, and because it just didn't feel right for me. It wasn't sitting right. So my sponsor agreed to give me a week just to catch up, and I did a brief feasibility study across the project on the resourcing needs, allocation. Spoke to the sponsor, spoke to people within the business, spoke to a couple of industry friends about this kind of project and what the kind of resourcing needs would be, and just applied some common sense to some of it as well. I'm not really going to need a developer resource for the first little part of the project, while the BAs might be out gathering requirements, for example. So, do I need them onboarded from day one? Can I break the project down into the work breakdown structure that I need, so I can see what allocation I need a resource, what kind of time that I need them for, add a little bit of contingency, and away we go. So I managed to get through that exercise in a few days, and had the work breakdown structure in, and actually start putting some allocation to the resources on how much I needed, and came back with a very different story then, to the allocation versus what was projected in the charter was very, very different. And if I could do this, the $1 million budget is fantastic, but there's potentially a different way of doing this if we engage our resources differently. So the question that I asked the business is, if we go for a consulting practice and I bring in a team, would we or could we save money doing that? And my recommendation was to go with that, because I believe we could. So the calculation that I did is, first of all, we're looking at the skills that we need with that consulting practice. And when consulting practices look at it, they go through an exercise of, okay, how many skills do we need over the course of this project? What resources have we got? If we present a rate card on a time and material basis, is that the best way forward? Sometimes we can negotiate a blended rate, and that's the kind of model that I used here. So ask the consultancy practice to look across their resources, figure out what a good blended rate would be that we could agree on. We then look at the number of resources that we actually needed, and instead of having half a resource here and half a resource there, we come up with a calculation to do full-time equivalency. So where we have a resource allocation at 50% and another allocation at 50%, that's the equivalent of having one FTE. So when we actually looked at it with the consulting practice for this example that we've got here, instead of the 10 or so resources that we had on the roadmap for us, we actually need 4.6 FTE equivalents, and with contingency, we said let's call it 5. Now the blended rate that we landed on was $150 an hour in this particular case for all of the resources. It came in as 5 FTE equivalents of $150 an hour for the duration of the project, and the cost then was $780,000. So if we compare that to the $1 million that we had before, we actually made some savings here on engaging the resources as a team from a consulting practice, and allowed them to flex the resources in and out on a T&M basis. Worth saying too that though, we also had a cap in the contract that they couldn't exceed for the work. So what was the benefit here? All the roles were covered. We have flexibility in resources. We only know when they needed them. It was an on-demand kind of relationship. There was less risk to us of like personality conflicts or bad fits within the team. You know, the assumption is that if you work in a consulting practice, you've worked together before, so you know that there's less likelihood of that happen. And then, of course, we push the risk onto that consultancy practice, so we get the guarantees of quality and the things coming across the line for a capped dollar amount. This project was actually it was delivered on time, and we actually came in under budget with the effort. They actually didn't spend all the budget that they were assigned as well. So that was a good news story. And then we didn't have to onboard or offboard any contract resources or keep them busy for their slack periods as well. So the advice here is don't be fooled by these hourly rates, because they don't really reflect the cost of a resource until you account for the productivity of that resource and the value that they bring into the project. In this case, I would have paid that higher rate for the resource through a consultancy practice, but I saved over $200,000 in effort over the life of the project. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we really need to think about all of the options that are available to us from a resourcing perspective, from a planning perspective, and I believe this is really where a PM brings value. So that case study from the previous slide, it shows we were 29% under budget. We had 290,000 in cost savings, and this was from a blended rate of $150 an hour. So my advice to resource managers is when we're looking at rate cards, we need to think about, are we really going to consume this resource for 6 months productively, or does it make sense to us to look at on demand as an option for us, and would it save us any money over the life of the project? And I think that's the value that your decent project managers and your consultancy practice can bring. So let's have a look at a resource management comparison here. And you know, we can body shop independent contractors, but we've got to remember a few things. It's fixed term, 100% allocation. It will be a fixed role. You've got some flight risk here. You know, if people are money motivated, then they might jump ship for a better hourly rate. They don't have really that back office support, and we're relying on interviewing and onboarding costs and the effort that goes into that kind of stuff as well. Sometimes the team fit's a gamble. Again, we've got an hour to assess this person, and interviews are generally a show. And no one contractor is going to fulfill all the skill needs across the board. I don't know how many times I've seen a job description for a role that, you know, it's just never going to exist. That one person is never going to exist, and if they are, you're not going to find them for the hourly rate you're asking for. So how do consultancy partnerships compare then, or what are the benefits for them? Well, I think the biggest one here, or biggest two, are the top two bullet points here. It's the flexibility of the resources and this on-demand approach. So for me, that's where the real value is. I only pay for what I use, and if I'm smart as a PM, I can really get some really good quality consulting resources in. Yes, they may be on paper a higher cost, but B, I'm really getting better value out of them. So thanks for watching. Thanks for your attention today. Just going to wrap this piece up. Really, the main story here is we need to think about leveraging consultant practices better. Also, that contractors do fulfill a really important part of our resourcing makeup. We just need to be sure that we're getting the best value for our projects and our clients out of them as project managers. And also, when you're planning, it's really important to look at the best model or the best fit for the project that you're leading. It isn't necessarily just a go out to the contract market and bring some contractors in, or fulfill it with internal resources that may not be able to commit. There are other options available, and consulting practices are one of them. So worth exploring, especially if you have the time and your clients allow you to reach outside the box. Sometimes it's easier said than done, and I may be oversimplifying some of the statements here, but I think it's a core value of being a project manager that you look at feasibility, you look at your planning, and you try where you can to make recommendations and bring value to your end clients, and it's a strong part of being a good project manager is being able to be flexible and have that agile mindset when it comes to resourcing, when it comes to planning, and when it comes to adding value to your client. Um, Thanks again for listening.